Hello and welcome to the Hult Center Community Conversation podcast. I'm Kara Brighton and I serve as the Education and Community Engagement Coordinator here at the Hult Center. Our intention with this podcast is to go a little deeper by interviewing community members on subjects related to select performances, with this first episode inspired by the Broadway production of To Kill a Mockingbird. We first connected with our guest, Imani Wolery, when we began the process of searching for panelists for a community conversation, happening on November 30th. We came across a Eugene Weekly story profiling Imani's father, Jerrin Hickman, a Black man serving prison time in Oregon who is currently seeking exoneration. Thank you so much, Imani, for taking the time to be here today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
You were a student at the U of O and now are in New York City. Can you tell us more about yourself? What are you passionate about?
Yeah, so when I went to U of O, I actually double majored in pre-law and ethnic studies with a legal studies minor. I've always been passionate about social justice and racial justice and diversity and inclusion. But growing up being the daughter of a wrongfully convicted felon made me even more interested in the criminal justice system and unpacking the evils of the prison industrial complex. So once I graduated U of O, I was like, I need to get out of Oregon. I need to spread my wings. So I applied to the Innocence Project in San Diego, and then I applied for the Innocence Project in New York, and I got accepted to be a legal intake intern at the New York Innocence Project. So literally weeks after I graduated college, I moved to New York with only two suitcases, which is hard because how are you supposed to have your whole life, and just go to New York? But I just felt like it was a super big opportunity for me to not only learn more about the legal process of wrongfully convicted cases, but also just get hands-on experience in the work compared to more of a personal experience that I already have.
Can you tell us from your perspective and experience what happened that night your father was arrested?
Yeah. Honestly, I remember that day like yesterday. I think about it all the time, and I do my own poetry stuff, and I remember I still to this day write about that moment because it was just so surreal. So basically, the day that my father got arrested, I was coming home on the school bus. I was in elementary school, and I remember I was approaching my stop, and I remember the friend that I was sitting next to me, and she looks at me and she's like, "Why is there police at your house?" And I obviously was just a kid. I turn and I'm like, "This has to be a mistake. Why is there was just a bunch of police cars all in front of my house." And I was just like, what is going on? I had no idea. So I remember walking up to my house, and my mom grabs me and she puts me on her lap, and then she kind of tells me everything's going to be okay. But I could kind of tell that she had been crying and that she was frazzled. And I just remember that day the police going through our house, and it was very, very traumatizing because I remember in my room, they were letting out all of my clothes. They were pulling out the drawers, letting them out, throwing all our stuff, breaking all of our valuables. And they didn't care. They basically just a bulldozer through our house and just was like, we don't care. Didn't put anything back. And I remember my mom had to use my phone to contact my grandmother and tell her what happened. And so basically what I found out later on is my dad went to work that morning, and they went to his work and arrested him. And what's crazy, it was a whole year after the crime, which was New Year's Eve 2017, and the arrest was December 8th, 2008. So, and then the trial was another year in 2009. So it wasn't until a whole year that they came and arrested him after like the crime happened.
How has your father's imprisonment impacted you and your family's life?
Honestly, it's affected our whole life. Like, not only, I'll kind of go into more depth about how it's affected, me and my brother's life, my grandma's life, my mom's life, but not only our life, but it's affected our whole community. It's affected, you know, relatives, it's affected everybody. And like my grandma says, like every day is conviction day. Every day we have to start our life sentence all over again because we also feel like we're in prison, And I recently heard a song lyric that said, "I'll be in denial for at least a little while. What about the plans we made?" And that's honestly how it's felt for me. Like, it just feels like every holiday, every Christmas, every birthday, every graduation, every holiday event, every sport, it was just a constant reminder that the state had robbed me of my relationship with my dad. Um, like, my dad is my best friend. He's my biggest supporter. And it just feels like it ruined everything. It just completely shook our whole world up. And not only did it affect me and my brother because we didn't have a father and we didn't have that support and that protection, that love, but my mom then became a single mother. So it was hard because what's crazy is my little brother was only about 8 months old when my dad got arrested. So he just was born. So, like, my dad now has been in prison, wrongfully convicted for 15 years, and my brother is 15. So it's like a constant, like, even in like the age that my brother turns, I think like, wow, this is another year that he's like not exonerated. This is another year, and then my grandma had to come back and forth between California and Oregon to visit him. Then she had to, immediately start paying for, lawyers, attorney fees, travel fees. So it's just completely shaken our whole world up, to be honest.
If you could speak for your father, what needs to be said?
Yeah. So I actually have a direct quote from my dad that I want to read for you guys. Because I try to like talk to him as much as I can. He calls me. So this is what he said. "The denial of due process is intentional. In 2010, at the motion for a new trial, it was established that I was misidentified by two white West Lynn women who said all Black men look the same. In 2013, the Court of Appeals said I would get a new trial because of the bad IDs. In 2014, Palmer, the Oregon Supreme Court, reinstated the conviction using the same evidence that was declared false in 2010. Judge Ahern at the post-conviction relief trial said both IDs were bad, which was the same position as the Court of Appeals in 2013. But he didn't grant the trial. But he did acknowledge and add 13 more errors to the previous two already established. The 10-year delay since 2013 has been intentional. This is racism." So basically, what he kind of wants to explain to people is that his exoneration has kind of been intentional. Like, they have every single appeal that we've had, every single trial, they continuously say that this was false identification and racial bias, but they continue to just not release him. So that's what he wants to be known.
What would the impact be for your father, yourself,
Yeah.
family, and community if your father was exonerated?
Honestly, I think about that every day. Like, every day, I'm just like, my family would be whole. My family, I feel like, since my dad has been arrested, has been broken, to be honest. I feel like it has separated our family. And I feel like every single day I think about it. Every single day I think about, oh, will my dad come and visit me in New York? He'll be able to come see me. He'll be able to watch me grow up. He'll be able to watch me go to law school, get married, like watch me just be a support system that I need right now, especially being in my early 20s, it's hard. So I think it would definitely, I think about it every day, like needing his support. And I think it would just really be a life-changing thing for my family. We would be able to do all the things we wanted to do, like take trips, spend holidays together. And I also feel like not only would that happen, but and also kind of is an asset for the community to see how my dad was wrongfully imprisoned, and also be a speaker for those who were also like wrongfully imprisoned, and also for my grandmother so she can speak about the challenges of being, both an advocate and a support system from outside of the prison system. So I think it would just completely lift a veil about the truth of not only the racist history of Oregon, but also just the structural racism, the inequalities in the prison industrial complex in the criminal justice system. Because obviously, people are waking up now more, but I think it would be super integral, especially to have that exoneration in Oregon.
What can community members do to support?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot. And I think what me and my grandmother have discussed is that we really need the community members to like email the state of Oregon and the representatives, keep talking about the case, keep the interest high, keep sharing on social media outlets. I think what we really need is just that constant pressure from the supporters about the powers that be in Oregon, and be able to reach people who have the power, authority, and the means to overturn his conviction. I feel like that's the most important thing, because we have been like, raising money for like legal fees and stuff. But what we really need now is just constant pressure to the representatives and the state of Oregon, and telling them that we need to exonerate my father. I think we just really need people to come together, or for people who have a lot of power and authority to help us out and continuously fight, until my father is exonerated.
And the last question, there are said to be 4 levels of racism: the individual side, which includes an internalized racism and interpersonal racism; systematic side, which includes institutional racism and structural racism. While all these areas of racism are important to understand, unpack, and work on, in your view, what needs to change systematically now?
I think all those different types of racisms overlap, but I think what's the most important right now, what needs to change, is the systematic racism. Um, Especially like the deep-seated, insidious, enabling culture of the legal community. Like there are so many, groups, organizations, agencies, and institutions that refuse to take correction action when they have the means and opportunities and legal opportunities to do so. So, like for example, judges, like the Oregon State Bar Associates, have backed away from their responsibility to do what was within each of their realm of power when it came to my dad's case. I think they need to admit to the institutional and the structural racism in his case. And I think that if you have the power to help a family, that you should be able to use that, and I think that's the most important thing that needs to change right now, so it doesn't continue to keep happening again. Because more and more do we see, Black Americans are, exonerated more, are sentenced longer, are misidentified. It continues to happen. And even the organizations that we do have usually only exonerate based on DNA. So that completely throws out all the other cases where DNA, they cannot use DNA. They have, you can't use DNA to prove racial bias and, false identification and things like that. So what really just needs to change is the systems and the history of racism in the systems.
We are so happy to have made this connection with you, Imani. Thank you for sharing your story with us. Those of you listening, we hope you can make it out to the Art House on November 30th at 6 to 7:30 for the Community Conversation Court to Kill a Mockingbird. This conversation will dive deeper into racial disparities in the criminal justice system and what we can do on an individual and systemic level to disrupt racism. This is a free event and open to the public. Broadway's To Kill a Mockingbird opens December 1st and runs through the 3rd at the Hult Center. Thank you for taking the time to listen.